Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to do something quite different to what I normally do on this channel, which is kind of combine my love of F1 with astrology and destiny matrix and tarot. So I've actually done quite a few of these videos on TikTok, so if you follow me on TikTok you'll not be a stranger to them, and people actually really enjoy them because I don't think anyone else is using this kind of combination of spiritual techniques to analyze, Formula One athletes. Like, that's a very niche thing to do. However, I have always used this because I think it's a fascinating tool to look at the energies of a particular driver. So, I look at the driver that I support, which is George Russell, and then I'll look at someone like Charles Leclerc and then Lewis Hamilton, and I'll say, okay, let's see how that's going to impact them. And I've been particularly following Lewis Hamilton very closely because his energy is changing very quickly. And I've done a lot of prediction videos about him that have come true as well. I also accurately predicted that Lando Norris would win last year, and said that he had to win this year because if he didn't, he would not really get that sort of championship energy come back again. And that was because he was perfectly aligned with the energies, but I'll talk about that when I come to him. So we're going to cover every single driver. Some of these driver predictions are going to be a little bit more fleshed out than others. That's because I actually have the rising sign for certain drivers. For most of them I don't. So we cannot really do a lot of in-depth astrological predictions because we really need a rising sign. It's very difficult itself just to say you're going to be, successful based on a sun or moon sign or midheaven or whatever. So it's really important that we have every single detail, the rising sign, the houses, the degrees, all of that. So for some of these, it's going to be basically Destiny Matrix alone. So if you're new to Destiny Matrix and want to know what it actually is, it is a numerology tool that is based on tarot. So there are 22 major arcana cards, and they are associated with the numbers in a Destiny Matrix wheel. So in your whole life, every year has a specific energy to it. So maybe that you're 30 now, you're in the energy 17, right? Or maybe you're 20, you're now entering the energy 9, and then you're on the cusp, but maybe next month you're about to enter energy 3. So each year has a different energy point to it, and you can combine these numbers to get an overall vibe and feeling, but mostly we analyze them with the major arcana number and sort of see what's happening. Again, this is actually weirdly accurate. Some people are saying, like, how can everyone have the same destiny and whatnot? But just like astrology, there's a positive and negative to each card. Have a card upright or reversed. So for example, you could have 16, which is the tower. It's a point of crisis. But for some people, that's a really important growth for them and actually ends up being a destructive energy that allows them to rebuild their life in a better way. So it isn't always negative in the way that we see it, which is why I'm sort of tiptoeing with certain energies for certain drivers. Okay, let's start with Lewis Hamilton because we know quite a bit about him, including his rising sign. So Lewis was born 7th of January 1985 at 3:30 in Stevenage, making him a Capricorn Sun, Scorpio rising and Cancer moon. Because we know he's a Scorpio rising, we immediately know that June 30th, Jupiter is going to enter his 10th house of career. That is really going to expand his opportunities and horizons. Jupiter is a planet of luck and abundance, but it's also about expansion and growing things. So that can grow a career. However, he is in a specific energy, which I'll talk about in a minute, that could also expand bad publicity. We already know that he is having a little bit of a fling with Kim Kardashian at the moment, and that could definitely add to public scrutiny. Jupiter is a positive planet, it's a benefic, but it does expand. So that means it can expand public perception of you in both positive and negative ways. It isn't always the most luckiest thing in the world. So Jupiter entering that 10th house will expand the spotlight and the success. At the same time, Lewis is also going to go through a Venus retrograde in his first house, October to November, and that's going to get him to reconsider his material assets, his feelings about luxury and emotional wealth, but also his relationship specifically. So it'd be interesting if he still has a connection with Kim Kardashian at this point, or he decides to move on to somebody else. The next thing is to look at the Destiny Matrix. So we can see that he's entered the 15 energy. This is the energy that I was very, excited about because it's the energy that he was in when he won his first championship. When you replicate energy in a Destiny Matrix, especially sort of 10, 15 years on, it tends to be really, really important. You might see actors that end up getting a role that they won an Oscar for, and they entered the same energy that they were in when they had their first sort of, not award-winning role, but like the role that got them into the spotlight. So we often see those kind of energies replicated. I also did a few videos where I predicted that the 15 energy would be successful for Lewis because he would be entering that sort of thriving, I'm back on the top, many podiums energy. But at the same time, he would also have some kind of public scrutiny, negative press about him, or he would say or do something very controversial. And I actually predicted that about a month before it came out that he was dating Kim Kardashian. And it was funny because I had comments, people saying, oh, I thought about your video. So it's interesting that, he's having a lot of that kind of scrutiny towards his relationship preferences, perhaps. I don't really know. We know that he's not really dating, he's not really committed, he's very in the game with driving, but he seems to entertain a lot of people. It's not really my business, it's not a gossip channel, but it's just interesting if we look at the 15. 15 itself in tarot is the devil, which is a Capricorn energy, but itself is also, media speculation. It's also saying something that is very off-piece, and at the same time, it is greediness. We saw a similar 15 energy with Sydney Sweeney during the American Eagle ad, and she had a lot of public scrutiny, but again, people calling her greedy, saying, can't believe you're doing this for a check, is it really that bad? So people will put a lot of their opinions on you with that 15 energy. So there's two ways to look at this. One is that the enhanced public scrutiny based on dating preferences, and also we know that Lewis gets a lot of, in my opinion, unwarranted hate just for existing. Some of that is probably people trying to pick their favorite drivers. Some of it I think is undoubtedly racial, but most of it I think is definitely unwarranted. The second thing is that 15 energy is also the successful replication of his first championship win. So if we look at that properly, we're like, okay, I think he definitely could have a really good run this year. And I think actually he's going to be a lot better than we think he's going to be. And I think he's a bit of a dark horse in a way, because I don't think anyone's going to say, yeah, Lewis Hamilton's going to be great this year because he had such a poor run last year. But the second thing is also that with Lewis, we know that he's doing really well in the pre-testing phase as well, just before their first Grand Prix in Australia. So I'm actually filming this before that. I'm hoping to get it up before Melbourne. But we know that he was doing quite well in that testing and actually giving the Ferrari fans the hopium. So we wonder what will happen with that. Also, I just wanted to point out this little thing at the bottom here, the karmic tale, that's called destruction, death of many souls. And it's actually when people have a karmic path where they, in a past life, had a lot of loss, maybe they feel compelled to help and rescue others. And we know that Lewis is vegan, he does a lot of charity work, he speaks up about Palestine, he's very open and vocal about his charitable and philanthropic opportunities. And so that particular karmic tale is when people are focused on saving others, transforming lives and relationships, and often using their wealth and their power to help the less fortunate, a bit of a Robin Hood in a way, but also engaging in a lot of creative pursuits and art, fashion. We know that Lewis is very involved in fashion as well. So even his karmic tale is really aligned to what he is doing. So I personally think that he's going to have a very interesting year. He's also got a central arcana 8, which is justice. And that is when you are perfectly balanced in life, but at the same time, you also find that you may get people who put legal cases against you, like you're just going about your day, you get subpoenaed for something, you're like, what? So I think it'd be interesting that Lewis might get caught up in a lot of legal fluff, a lot of contracts. Even recently, he can only do a certain amount of scenes in Drive to Survive because of his licensing to Apple. So he could end up getting caught up in a lot of legal problems in life, but it can also be that karmically, because 8 is a Saturnian number in Destiny Matrix, that karmically he's repeating a lot of energy from the past. And I think that's why he appears to be such a kind person, because of that destruction of many souls, past life karma. If I was to put Lewis in the rankings for top 5, I'd actually put him at second. And that's because I really think he's going to be successful this year. I think he's going to definitely claw his way up. Do I think he's going to win? Probably not, no. Never say never, but I don't think he's going to win. I would say, though, he's going to be very close. He's going to be definitely up in the rankings. I'd put him second, maybe even on par with Charles Leclerc, because they're both in the Ferrari, so they both got an even advantage. Don't know Charles' rising sign, but he's in a very good energy himself, so they could definitely be neck and neck. And then we'll see, basically, in my opinion, who's fighting for first and fourth, really, because they're going to be quite close to each other. The next driver is the driver that I support, which is a little bit controversial because some people really don't like him, is George Russell. I think he's great. I love his sense of humour. I think he's a nice guy. Yes, does he moan a lot? Probably, but he's also British, so we moan a lot. I I think people don't like him because he's a bit of a sort of like, oh, miss, you forgot to collect the homework, a bit of a goody two-shoes. But at the same time, I think he's open about the things he wants to talk about. You know, I think he's very straight-laced. But at the same time, I don't think he is afraid to challenge people when they need to be. He's challenged Max Verstappen many times, which I think is really important. You know, that whole, the meme of borderline violence. I don't think anyone can forget that. He was talking like he was in Criminal Minds.
Whenever anything is not going his way, he lashes out with unnecessary anger and borderline violence.
But I like his sense of humour, and I do support him and Mercedes. And I'm pretty unapologetic about that. So George was born 15th of February 1998. So there's a few things to count here. We don't know his rising sign, although I have predicted many times I think he's actually a Cancer rising. He has all the features of a Cancer rising, and if you look in his eyes, it just gives Cancer rising straight off the bat. He definitely has a very feminine energy to his eyes, but also like a childlike wonder. You see that often in Cancer risings. They have very beautiful eyes, often very beautiful eyelashes too. So he's an Aquarius sun and a Libra moon. He's a Capricorn Venus, so Capricorn Venus like me. And the biggest thing is that he's actually got a Saturn in Aries, meaning that he is in his Saturn return now. Saturn return in Aries is debilitated, but it can create champions when you put the hard work in. This is adding to the success, in my opinion. I don't think it's actually a debilitation for him. You would say, oh, going through a Saturn return is quite difficult. But Saturn returns is your initiation to adulthood, meaning that you tend to achieve something or you commit to something pretty strong. I think he could definitely get engaged or married during this time. He's got a pretty strong relationship. But the Saturn in Aries can create champions if it's put in the, it really puts in the work. The second thing, he's got a Pisces Mars, and we actually have Mars in Pisces right now from March the 2nd. So when we have the first Grand Prix in Melbourne, he will be having his Mars return, really puts a fire at your ass and adds a lot of motivation. Of course, it's very non-confrontational, so it's a little bit less risky, so he may not want to take risks. He want to just chill out to begin with, kind of test the field a bit more. But at the same time, his Aquarius sun, which is being highlighted really strongly this year by the North Node moving into Aquarius, but also the eclipse in Aquarius we just had, in which he's having that real identity shift. Of course, we don't know what house this sun is in, but if I was to guess, I'd say it was in quite an open house. I don't think it's in a cadent house like the 12th or the 6th or something along those lines. It seems a little bit more bright than that. Interesting as well, Libra moon is a little bit indecisive. So Libra moon mixed with Pisces Mars return, very non-confrontational. Really don't think he's going to be putting his foot on the gas for the first couple of races, that's for sure. However, this is the bit that really shows success. So we have him as a 7 arcana in Destiny Matrix. 7 is a chariot, which is basically a fast car. This is a guy born to drive. You know, he's very consistent, he's very reliable, and he's fast. So it's interesting having the 7 arcana because it's quite rare to have this within drivers, but Destiny Matrixes, a lot of them have things like 3 or 10, but with 7, it's very much with really going forward. It tends to be a very prosperous, successful arcana to have. It's not a difficult one. It is, of course, burdened by the weight of people's expectations on you, but if you're reliable and you're consistent, well then, there's nothing wrong with that. The biggest thing here is that he's in 17 energy right now, which is the star. Funny enough, me and him are in the same energy. Perhaps I'll be well known for astrology. We don't know. I'm getting there on TikTok. But the 17 energy is the star. It's hope and faith after a difficult time. But it is quite literally in Destiny Matrix and Tarot a fame card. So it's when you achieve notoriety, you're thrust up on the spotlight, and people see you for something you've done that's really amazing. You know, some amazing achievement. We also know that the Mercedes regulations are really good. They are predicted to be at the top. He's one of the bookies' favourites. And maybe allegedly Mercedes have been sandbagging a little bit in the pre-test and they're going to be a lot better than we think. I certainly think they will be. So you have to put a bit of a logic together with spirituality. It's not just like, oh yeah, he's going to come out of nowhere and get this. We know Mercedes are they have a good car and they're going to adapt to these regulations really well. So I think that 17 energy and the star with his Saturn return and his Aquarius energy, which is really going to be boosted by this year, and Mercedes regulations altogether, I personally think, and I'm saying this now, that he's our champion for the year. If he doesn't end up being the champion, it will be because of something something related to his confidence or identity. I don't think it's going to be anything related to, for example, the car being poor. It's definitely going to be getting in your own head or something along those lines. Interesting, as I just mentioned with Lewis, his karmic tale is called Betrayal of Family Passions. So this means that in a past life, he had a lot of disruptions in the family unit, and that's because people would either depend on him or he depended heavily on them, which creates a lot of resentment in the family and suffering, or betrayal. And I think he's probably got a decent relationship with his family. Again, this is not a gossip channel, so I don't really know. I don't know him personally. But I think it seems that he had a lot of expectations from his father to do well because of, you know, how much his father sacrificed. So there's a level of suffering there in the family unit. But additionally, in the past, him or his family could have broken the law or done something very abusive that really, you know, unsettled the colony, unsettled the village. And so in this life, he's got to be a bit more straight-laced, which is why he probably comes across as a goody two-shoes, because in a past life, he was most likely a criminal. So it's interesting that the past life of immorality or some kind of like outlawness, this low bandolero energy, has got him being so sort of like, I don't want to say stick up the arse, because like I said, I really enjoy him as a person, but you know, he's a little bit straight-laced, isn't he? But it's the Capricorn Venus, I think. He is, as Aquarius Sun, got a lot of Saturnian energy. And because of that, he will adapt to Saturn and Aries return a lot easier than other people would if they had basically all Venusian energy. Yes, his moon is ruled by Venus, but having an Aquarius Sun, I think that really helps with the Saturn return. So he's my winner for the year. Third driver is Charles Leclerc. So we do not know the rising sign for Charles Leclerc. For some reason, every time I looked at the drivers, everyone's a Scorpio rising. I'm like, we can't all be a Scorpio rising. He's got very intense eyes like a Scorpio rising, and I've actually made a few predictions for him at Silverstone last year, which came true based on Scorpio rising. One was that I said he was going to have probably one of the worst, most difficult drives of his career. He then came out in an interview that same day and said, God, that was actually one of the most difficult drives of my whole career. And I said to my friend, I went, oh my God, can you believe that? So there are some things that I've actually predicted with the Scorpio rising, but I don't want to just say he is, because, you know, we can't really use it as fact. But we do know that he's a Libra Sun and an Aries moon. Having an Aries moon is really interesting because it's born for leadership, but it's also someone who gets very angry easily and has no patience. I think he snaps quite easily. I think he can be very sort of like this, you know, which is very understandable with the kind of strategy team he's got. But at the same time, the Libra Sun makes him appear very attractive. I mean, he's a beautiful boy. But also like this sense of like, he's just got a very kind aura about him. He's got very kind eyes. He's also got a Sagittarius Venus as well. It's a little bit of a playboy kind of Venus on the surface, but I've always said Sagittarius Venus is one of those signs and placements that get misinterpreted very easily, because it's actually very philosophical Venus. So it's someone that it needs to intellectually stimulate him and make him feel protected and safe, which I think he's got. So he was born October 16th, 1997. So he actually has 10 energy right now. 10 is the Wheel of Fortune. That's really, it's like a seesaw, it can go either way. But that 10 energy is also fate and a conclusion. It's like, I'm finally able to say, I've done really well. He's also then going to replicate that 10 energy next year. So he's going to be in a run of that energy. That's really interesting when it comes to how he's been feeling, because he has been in a 20 judgment energy in which he has gone through a lot of karmic, you know, repeating of mistakes and past lessons, but also not getting much luck. So this year should be a lot luckier for him. Again, coupled with Lewis's success in his Destiny Matrix and the Ferrari adaptation to regulations, I think he's going to do a lot better than he did last year. Do I think he's going to win? No, probably not, but I think he might get a close second or third. Again, I think he's competing with Lewis, actually. I think he might also find that in a certain way, he might also make decisions that are quite risky this year, and then that changes the whole trajectory of what we think he's going to be doing in the future. It's quite interesting as well that the 10 energy in Wheel of Fortune is kind of like a soulmate energy. It's beautiful for finding your relationship, or like normally a chance encounter or marriage. And of course, we know that he got engaged October last year, which was when he entered that 10 energy. He just got married. He had the summer wedding, and he's going to get married again next year. So he's in that really beautiful romantic energy. And I think that's very consistent. I don't see that changing. Interesting that in his past life, he has a karmic tale called the Warrior. We love the warrior. This is when you have a karmic pattern of being very aggressive, warrior-like, you know, often quite independent, or having arguments, and you have an intense desire to win and compete. But at the same time, you will not change and you will not move. You will tend to just like be stagnant. There is so much discourse about how the fact he's never going to win a championship if he stays with Ferrari, but he will stay with Ferrari because he's being loyal. But if he learned from his karmic tale, he would understand that there's probably better opportunities for him elsewhere. You might also ask, where's he meant to go at this point? Good question. I don't really know. But at the same time, if something opened up for him, I would wonder if maybe he should move around a little bit, because his karmic tale is saying, actually, being stagnant is not going to get you anywhere. I think it also highlights this change for him, because in that 10 energy and then learning from your karmic mistakes, it's indicating a positive change where the new cycle begins. So it's like a favorable sort of flip of the dice, or flip of the coin, I should say. But again, if you don't adapt to that 10 energy properly, it becomes negative, unwanted, stagnant, and then you just end up repeating the same mistake. So I really hope Charles can actually get into the understanding that he needs to basically move, keep going, keep moving, and embrace change, and trust that the universe is going to support him, and that he's incredibly talented. He's probably one of the best wheel-to-wheel drivers we've got, and, you know, just go with the flow, really. But at the same time, that energy that he was in before in the 20, which is very, you know, very focused on self-doubt, stagnation, poor judgment, not learning lessons, actually very fearful. I think if he ends up moving away from that, I think it could be a really fantastic year for him. So I would definitely put him in my top 3. So the next driver is another Mercedes driver, and that is Kimi Antonelli. We love Kimi, Kimi Antonelli. He is like a young Valentino Rossi. I think he's absolutely adorable. He's only 19, but he's a beautiful boy. August 25th, 2006 is his birthday, so he's really young. We don't know his rising sign, but he's very Virgo. He's a Virgo sun and Virgo moon. And what you will notice throughout this reading, throughout this video, I've done so many personal readings and calling it a reading, but maybe it is. You'll notice there's a lot of Virgo moons and Virgo suns. It's ruled by Mercury, so it's very methodical, but of course it deals with things like communication. And in fact, the 3rd house, which is ruled by Mercury, deals with transport and vehicles. So it's really interesting that that's actually a big denominator here. He also has a nodal return at the moment, because his north node is in Pisces and his south node is in Virgo. So that's a really important spiritual shift for him to move towards his purpose in life, his spiritual direction of travel. So he's really figuring out the ropes in more ways than one at the moment. Of course, he will go out of that when the North Node moves into Aquarius later this year. So again, we don't have his rising sign, so hard to predict anything else really based on astrology. So let's look at his destiny matrix. So we have got him in the energy of the world, which is endings. He also had a recent breakup. Again, not going to speculate on that. He had a recent breakup. It's very Saturnian energy, so it's kind of like hard. It's a harsh lesson to learn. It's also people just going their separate ways. And because of that, it's a conclusion and a new beginning for him. So in a way, he's had endings, but he now has a lot of things on the horizon for him. Maybe that's a new relationship, but also the prospect of really doing well this year. He will absolutely get a maiden podium this year. I'm saying that for sure. And interestingly, can you see this number here on the left, which is 7? That's the way people see him. Again, it's the Chariot. It's the fastest card in the deck. It is the central arcana for George Russell. It is the fast car. So people see him as a prodigy, right? They see him as the next Max Verstappen or whatever. Like I said, he's like a young Valentino Rossi. If he switched to like MotoGP, we'd be like, that's Rossi. So he's definitely a prodigy, and people want to see him succeed. I don't think anyone wants to see him do poorly. So that world energy is a conclusion, but it also means that he must adapt to the energy. So he's really got to knuckle down. He can't be, you know, just saying, oh, you know, I'm just going to see how it is, test the ropes. This is the 2nd year now, and people are really going to rely on him with these regulations that Mercedes are bringing in that are good. His past life is different. He's got a karmic tale called the Rebel. So this is in a past life when you were often very distant from your family. Maybe you were estranged, or you were cut off for some kind of reason. You felt like an outsider within your family, or maybe you just feel a bit odd. It's kind of like you are, it gives me the phrase, it's very lonely at the top on your own. No one else can be here with me. I don't know if you ever remember like the original Batman film with Michael Keaton, where she was like, why do you have to do it? And he's like, because no one else can. And I'm not saying that Kimi Antonelli is the only person that can do this, but in his family, he might feel like he's the only one that can really make a push for this. And that means he often struggles in relationships, and he may have multiple marriages or multiple long-term relationships, but never really settle down to what he wants until later on in life, which is fine because he's very young, he's got lots of time. But there might also be conflicts with his family in this life too. Do I think Kimi's going to win this year? Nope. Do I think he's going to pick up a maiden win? Absolutely, 100%. And I think he will get a couple of podiums. Every time he's on top for qualifying, I get so excited. I'm like, yeah, like he's always the one I look for, even though I support George, he's always the one I look for. So I think he will do well, but he's definitely got to buckle down. I think actually the recent heartbreak, shall we say, might put a fire up his arse. So it'd be very interesting to see how he goes. Again, astrologically, I can't do much with this with no rising sign, but energy-wise, it looks pretty good. So let's look at the next two drivers, which are McLaren drivers. I've got Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. So let's begin with Lando Norris. So I accurately predicted last year that Lando would win, and that's because I said that if he did not win last year, he was going to really struggle to get the win in the next few years. The reason being is that his central arcana is number 5, as we can see, and that is the Hierophant, which means he inspires others and he allows people to believe in themselves and to believe in him. It's really sort of like, I've got a lot of fans on me. Charles Leclerc got the same thing. Both beautiful boys, both inspire a lot of people. People go crazy. Remember that little boy that was like, Charles Leclerc? You know, it's like, they really go crazy. And of course, Lando Norris has also got a Libra Venus, so people are absolutely attracted to him. What's interesting for me is that 5 energy, with the year energy he was in, it's the same, it's replicated. So that means he's really living out his central energy. And why I said that was going to be the time for him to go for it is because this year he enters a much more difficult one, which is 13. And people want to tiptoe over what 13 is. It's the death card, right? Does that mean it's a literal death? No, it hardly ever means that. So don't get anxiety or worry about it. It's just transformation. I actually said last year he would probably have his head elsewhere with different business ventures and his own relationship. 13 is also a difficult energy for celebrities because they often experience some kind of public scrutiny or something happens to them outside of their control and they have to adapt to it. So for example, somebody takes something you said out of context and blasts it everywhere, and then people are like, oh my God, I can't, you said that. This happens to Lando frequently, actually. A really good example of the 13 energy was Kim Kardashian when her sex tape was released, right? It was kind of like really shot her into a spotlight, of course, but you know, at what price? So very similar to 15, there's a big transformation. It's also a transformation of identity in the self and also what you want to be doing. Again, you know, when you reach the peak, where do you go from there? You know, the top of the mountain, the edge of the peak, comes a time you miss what you seek. He's won his first championship. Where do you go from there? Max Verstappen's attitude is quite similar. He's like, well, I've already won 4 championships. Why do I care what's going on now? So it might be a sort of, I'm not as motivated to win because I've already done it. And so he might be transforming in lots of different ways. I don't know if he still owns Quadrant, but he had a couple of business ventures that went quite well. And I don't know if he'd be more interested in doing things like that now as well. So his karmic tail is very similar to Charles Leclerc. Again, he's got the same central arcana and the same karmic tail. These two are very close and similar. And actually, I think the public reception to them are quite similar in a way, except I think Lando gets more hate. So because he has a past life karma of warrior, again, it's staying with something because you feel like you've got to see it through to the end. I think he's been with McLaren for pretty much this whole time, right? So he's very much focused on being loyal to this team, but also he will have a very us or them mentality. And I think he probably suffers from anxiety a lot of the time. Again, I don't have his rising sign, but he does have a Scorpio sun and a Capricorn moon. Lethal combo, in my opinion. Okay, so Capricorn moon is really, it's exiled. It's just not good. Capricorn moon is someone who overthinks. They're very insecure. Again, not for everybody. Some people have different ways, depending on what the house is in as well. But it tends to be someone who's very insecure. They will often trip over their words. People will just find them to be a bit of an odd bird. Not in a sort of like, you're weird, but like, why have you just said that? You know, like you just can't trip over your words a lot. You kind of bottle things. You know, he had his a reputation of being the bottler. And I think that Capricorn moon is very strong there. The Scorpio sun is also quite reserved as well. I think he's got a very sort of dark and handsome kind of view about him. But at the same time, I think he is quite reserved, often comes across quite shy, but I think behind closed doors he's probably a bit of a wild child, and I think he's probably a very lovely person, but that Capricorn moon is making him think he's probably the worst things on the world. You know, when you look in the mirror, you think, you're a piece of shit. He probably thinks that quite a lot. And then when he goes out in the world, he's like, I'm amazing. And as soon as he goes home, he's like, fucking hate myself. So there's a lot of that kind of energy that I think is percolating for him. And you saw it very evidently last year, you know, when he crashed into Oscar in Barcelona. I think it was Barcelona, correct me if I'm wrong. And I thought, well, that's manifestation. You know, there was something where I was like, oh, we're getting caught up on our head here. And I remember actually saying, I think it was in a horoscope or something, but I said that Capricorn moon was really strong this time. And then someone was like, what do you mean by that? And then I had to elaborate, and then that actually began the whole F1 series. Lando is very young, but he does not have a Saturn return. He has a Saturn in Taurus, so he's yet to go through his Saturn return yet, which will be in 2028. So he will not be having that sort of initiation into adulthood or personal sort of transformation in that way, although the 13 energy for him at the moment is very strong. Just one thing I want to add as well is we can look at past years to see how they have accurately aligned to his life as well. So let's take one quite notable year, which is when he was 15. He was in the energy 17, which is the one that George Russell is in right now. It's the start. It's when you reach kind of like a level of fame or notoriety. You achieve something that no one else has achieved. So actually he won the SIK FIA World Championship, and that made him the youngest karting world champion in that category. So he kind of broke a record. Number 17 at age 15. So that's something where it's like, wow, we've really sort of broken a record here. Hence why I'm really doubling down on George Russell becoming so notable for his talents this year and winning a championship. So we can actually see throughout the years how that's actually impacted and worked. And I'm actually looking at my iPad at the moment because I've got a lot of the stuff in front of me, so forgive me if I'm looking. But there is one article that I'll put on the screen here, which from the Times, which is too young for a driver's license, but is this the next Lewis Hamilton? It says Lando P1 2015. And I looked at that and thought, let me track down 2015. And again, he was in that 17 energy. So it's really interesting that, you know, we've got publicity about him. You get a Times article saying that you're this next world champion and you're in that 17 energy. It really can't be mistaken. But this shows definitely a transformative energy. Interestingly, if you look at some F1 predictions like P1 with Matt and Tommy, who I absolutely love, I watch them every week, I think they're amazing, they haven't really included Lando in their predictions much. It's very much George, Charles, or maybe Max, but they don't really include Lando despite the fact he is the world champion. So I wonder if that energy is kind of like people are picking up on it more than we think, or there is something else to it. But I don't personally think he's going to win this year. I think he had his time last year, and I think his head will be in other ventures in the next few months. So the next driver is McLaren driver, and that's Oscar Piastri. We love Oscar. I think he's great. I also just love an Aries. What's funny about Oscar is that he's very much a man of little words in a way. He sort of seems like a silent destroyer, but I think he's actually really nice, very kind soul, and probably quite shy. So he has an Aries sun and a Virgo moon. Again, yet another Virgo moon, similar to Kimi Antonelli, and he was born April the 6th, 2001. So he has a very similar karmic tale to Lewis Hamilton, which is the destruction, death of many souls, which is why I know he's a nice, kind person, because in a past life he was probably taken advantage of, and people were not very nice to him. And so in this life, he's very focused on helping people. He might be well known for his charitable and philanthropic work as he gets older, and specifically, you know, somebody who, I think as we know last year, I think it was kind of like being very sportsmanlike, wasn't it? At the points where we were like, don't be so sort of on the grenades for Lando, but you know, dig your feet in a little bit. But I think he is a very kind person. What's interesting is his major arcana is number 8, which is similar to Lewis again. So him and Lewis actually share quite a lot of similarities. And what you'll notice throughout this reading and this video is that a lot of drivers share similarities, which is interesting because some of them have wildly different birthdays. So I think he might end up pursuing some kind of creative pursuit as well. I think he's going into modelling. I think he might be interested in fashion or something more creative, perhaps. What's interesting is that 8 arcana makes me think of a different energy to Lewis, which is more about actually getting justice. I think he's had a lot of injustice, very Saturnian, very I've got to put the hard work in. And he might become a little bit more ferocious throughout the years, a little bit more cutthroat. Very much the black swan, you know, going from white swan to no. I'm having a complete transformation here. But he will be going into the 11 energy, which is much nicer. This is strength and ferocity. It is Leo energy, so it's positive, it's very masculine. It's really aligning to an Aries energy, actually. Stronger leadership, physical strength as well, so like physically feeling like you have a lot of vitality. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to hold back anymore. So imagine 8 as being Saturnian, sort of like, I'm just going to see what happens. I've got to try to be a strong team player, interpersonal relationships. Here it's like, nope, I'm going to be much more independent and really go my own way. And again, it is really all about roaring like a lion. And so I think he's going to be a lot more black swan, a lot more angry this year, which could do him quite well. If I was to put him in the top 5, I definitely put him in the top 5. I'd say he was probably something like 4th or 5th. Again, I don't want to be too specific with my rankings because the energy is so vague, but I definitely wouldn't put him outside. I wouldn't put him like below sort of like the midfield player, shall we say, but I don't think he's going to win this year. He could get very close, but again, I still think George, Lewis and Charles have much better shot than he does. The next driver is Fernando Alonso. We actually have Fernando's rising sign, which is great. We can do a lot more of this. So he was born 29th of July 1981 in Spain at 10:30, and he's a Leo Sun, Virgo rising, Cancer moon. Interesting. So he's got a Cancer moon just like Lewis Hamilton. So Virgo rising is ruled by Mercury. Again, have you noticed a lot of Mercury energy coming out throughout this video? Well, what is Mercury? It is, again, ruling that house, the 3rd house of transport and vehicles, but it's also super methodical. It's like, boom, it's data analysis. So these are the drivers that get really interested in the data of their races and saying we need to change this metric and this one and blah, blah, blah. But also at the same time, being ruled by Mercury is a bigger sign of being a millionaire or a billionaire based on some research I've been doing recently. So if you are Mercury ruled, you're more likely to be successful and wealthy than someone who is ruled by the sun. So like a Leo rising, for example. So he has a Leo sun, Virgo rising, Cancer moon. And I think he definitely kind of fits that energy. So outside of his rising sign, I think it's going to be interesting to see how his Saturn placement plays out, because he will have Saturn moving into Aries this year for him, and that's going to be in the 8th house. I think his partner is pregnant at the moment, and I think that that's going to be a birth, because normally Saturn in the 8th, although it can be like constriction and fear and facing your fears, it's actually also rebirth and the birth of a child and like a bonding intimately with a partner. So what's going to be interesting is him facing his fears as a newborn father, because how do you sort of interact with racing and risking your life when you now have a family? Daniel Ricciardo dealt with this quite strongly as well. So I think there's going to be an energy shift for him. We can actually see it in the Destiny Matrix too. So he's currently at 7, which is the Chariot. He obviously picked up quite a bit more at the end of the season as he moved into the 7 energy, which again is that Chariot, and it's it's doing a lot more work than he was at the start of the season. But he will go into the 3 energy later this year after July, and so at the second half of the season, that's his abundant fertility energy. So this is more like the birth of a child or having a child, so we know that he is going to be, and again it aligns with the Saturn being in the 8th house for Virgo rising. So that 3 energy is going to be more of a focus on parenthood for him. So I'd be very interested to see that he might be focused more on his personal life rather than racing, and again he's really got to face the fear of racing now he's got a family with Saturn being in the 8th. I think if you also look at his karmic tail, there's a very similar energy to Charles Leclerc in that there is a stagnation, and you really have to keep the wheel spinning, as it were, because if you don't have aspirations or you have a lack of action, then it's just going to become really boring for you. So I think you might find that actually adapting to the regulations of what Aston Martin is bringing, which I think could be bit dicey. I don't think they're looking too great, but I did say prediction wise that I think we could be quite surprised by Alonso at the start of the season. I think he could be a lot more successful than we're expecting him to be, and then as we get closer to the end of the season, again, head is elsewhere and we might be thinking about things in a sort of different way. We have seen that with Max Verstappen, where he's like, I don't want to do other things, I've got a family at home, I want to do some GT racing and whatnot. So people do change their track, and I think again Lando Norris might have a similar kind of viewpoint. The next driver is Lance Stroll. I don't know about Lance, to be honest. He was born October 29th, 1998. But it makes him a Scorpio Sun and Aquarius Moon, and my God, does he fit that energy. He's quite reserved and quite shy. I think he's probably got a lot of social anxiety. Scorpio Sun, very similar to Lando Norris, comes across a little bit shy, and maybe says things that are a bit off-piece. I mean, Lance doesn't say much at all, does he? I mean, he's a man of very few words. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it was hard, and then you move on, you think, blimey. you could write a book, you know? And Aquarius moon is one of the rarest moon signs to have, but again, it's very robotic, sometimes detached moon sign to have. So emotionally, he's very detached. You can't really get much out of him. So rising sign aside, because we don't know it, he definitely adheres to the sun and moon. And again, having a Saturn-ruled moon sign is really going to constrict his emotions, and a Scorpio sun is really not the best either. So he's got a bit of a difficult chart just off the bat. He's in number 3, which is a more abundant energy. It's interesting that he will have a similar energy to Alonso towards the end of the season, but at the start of the season, so they kind of like switch energies almost. So that energy is confidence about yourself and saying like, I don't really care what anyone else says, I'm going to be really confident, you know, strong self-esteem. But then it will move into 22 at the end of the season, which is more spontaneous, taking more risks. You might see him do some very stupid things, but at the same time, I think he might be a little bit more expansive about what he wants to do in the future. You might also find that he either exits his position in Aston Martin or he moves to something else. One of his karmic tales involves a lot of greed and control. I think he himself is probably just a pawn in the game of his family. Again, I don't know anything about him, so this is just alleged to how I see the situation. But his family is very rich. I think his dad's in the Epstein files or something like that. Yikes, right? So his past karmic tale is often, being controlled or being caught up in a family full of greed and this desire for power that ends up controlling him. He might find that throughout life he either does not want children, or if he does have children, he puts a lot of excessive control onto them as well, just through past trauma. And he also needs to learn that from a past life that he doesn't need to worry or have so much fear about his own physical health. I think he's had a few problems with his wrist and whatnot, but there seems to be a lot of like anxiety bubbling and vibrating inside of him, and I think you can actually see it on the surface. But again, that karmic tale really adheres to the Scorpio sun and Aquarius moon too. So do I think Lance is going to do well this year? It's very neutral. Some of these drivers are just very neutral for me. Not good, not bad. Has a couple of good races, a couple of bad races. Do I think he's on the top? Nope. But I do think that he would just be sort of middling. He's definitely not in the top 10, but he's also not going to be like the worst thing in the world. He's not 20, right? He's just neutral. The next driver is Arvid Linblad, who I know nothing about, but I'm very interested to know more about him. He seems interesting. So he was born August 8, 2007, making him a Leo sun and Gemini moon. And he's new to F1, so he's a rookie, he's brand new. He's in the 22 energy, so he's really in a sort of, I can take risks kind of energy now. You might find him taking more risks or being a little bit more explorative with his style. He's also got a sense of, this is going to be a really big foot in the door for him. So you might see him exploiting any opportunity he can, but why not, right? He might also be in a sort of, I want to learn from people who are more advanced than me. And also you might find him in the future becoming a really strong mentor to someone else. Having that Leo sun, very similar to Alonso, is making him shine brightly, but also Gemini moon, really loves to debate and also loves to have a certain opinion about things. It's also a generally quite anxious moon sign as well. It's a little bit ADHD at times, but again, a Gemini moon is focused on the data and analytics of what he's doing as well, so you might really get involved in the metrics. Again, Gemini's ruled by Mercury of that 3rd house, which deals with transportation, cars and vehicles. So again, it's another good indicator that he's really into his racing. So do I think he's going to do well? It's really hard to say. I don't know much about his chart at all, so I just can't really give him much of a prediction. However, what I will say in that 22 energy is that it doesn't really matter if he does good or bad because he's in a very experimental energy. Having said that, I do think he will probably adapt quite well. I don't see him getting kicked out or anything like that. But at the same time, I also don't think he's going to be like, oh my God, the most amazing thing since sliced bread. Again, quite a neutral position for him. The next driver is Liam Lawson. So Liam, again, I don't have his rising sign, but he was born February the 11th, 2002, making him an Aquarius sun and Aquarius moon. Oh, the boy is very Saturn ruled. So obviously we need to know his rising sign to know what his actual chart ruler is, but there is a lot of Saturnian energy there, but also a lot of Uranus energy. I think he's quite sort of like off the cuff with some of his comments. I think he's quite sort of like, quite reactive. I think he's a Kiwi, so, it's quite funny. But I think he can get quite frustrated at people's choices, and then he sometimes kind of projects that onto others. Again, it's not a bad thing, but, I think you always know he's going to be quite a fun person to be around, a bit of a partier. Aquarius sun, Aquarius moon. Again, Aquarius moon is quite rare, and that's what... I say it's quite rare, and then I go, oh yeah, but then also Lance Stroll has it, but it generally is quite a rare moon sign, and an Aquarius sun as well, which is similar to George Russell. So he is going to be a little bit more focused on adapting to the technology of his cars as well. Again, a little bit more focused on the rules and regulations of saying you can't do that and you can do this, but then also at the same time hypocritically doing it himself. So there's also a really interesting energy with him. He's in 18 at the moment, which is the moon, which means he's very tapped into his intuition and what feels right for him. But the moon is also very feminine. We can also see that it tends to focus on the ebbs and flows of life, so he's really going to have to adapt. I think that word adaptability is strong for him, and what's nice about his chart is that he's got the great energy of knowing the traditional structures and rules of racing, but then able to add something new and exciting, which means he adapts to new regulations well. So do I think he's going to adapt to the regulations well this year? Yes, I definitely do. I think him and George are going to be like amazing for that. So I think that he could have a very interesting year. I would definitely actually put him in my top 10. I don't think he's going to win, but I would put him in my top 10. I think he's going to have a very, fast-paced kind of year, very in and out, in and out. You might find that one week he does fantastic, the next week he doesn't. But at the same time, I think he's got a really good attitude to adapt to the kind of change that this year is going to bring. The next driver is Max Verstappen. Probably thinking, why have you left it so late to do Max? But I'm just doing it in the order that I felt like doing it in. So I actually do have Max Verstappen's rising sign. It's not exactly been sort of identified as this is his rising sign, but there was an old Dutch article that mentioned his birth time, so we've taken that, and it's a Sagittarius rising. And one reason why I think he's definitely a Sag rising is because we do not have any Sagittarius in F1, if you've not noticed. No Sagittarius. Interesting why? Because they're very fast paced, but maybe they're a bit too philosophical for something as rigid as F1. One thing I do want to say is, a Sag rising because they really stand out from the crowd. And he really stands out from the crowd. Just his sort of I don't give a fuck attitude is very Sag rising, because he's a Libra sun and a Virgo moon, right? Which again, as we've noticed from these drivers' charts, is not different. We have a lot of Libra suns and a lot of Virgo moons, but that Sag rising stands apart from everything else. You're ruled by Jupiter, meaning you have a look, but you're also super expansive, you're larger than life, and you're very much in people's faces. And what I like about Sag rising is that it's always looking at different opportunities, exploiting it and saying, you know what, I don't really care if something bad's going to happen because I know that I'm always supported. And we know that Max sort of has a I don't really care attitude. Yes, he's also Dutch, which is a very sort of, I don't really care, hey, lads, pindagas, peanut butter, I don't really care. But at the same time, I think that Sag rising is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. So he was born September 30th, 1997. A lot of drivers born in September, again, if you've noticed, at 1:20 in Hasselt, Belgium. So Libra Sun, Sag rising, Virgo moon. What I want to know is, how is he going to adapt to F1 when Jupiter enters his 9th house in the summer? Because Jupiter rules the 9th house, okay? So this is really, really prosperous and amazing. But when that's expanding a house of different opportunities, philosophy, the sort of like emboldened spiritual journey, the untethered soul, what are you going to do? Because I think he's already talking about retirement. I want to drive in the GT. I got family. All these things I want to do. These regulations are boring. I don't like them. My back hurts. All this stuff he's going on about, right? I think that he's definitely going to be far more intrigued by different opportunities in front of him. Max is also having a Saturn return in Aries, similar to George Russell as well, and his is in his 5th house. So he just really wants fun. He really doesn't want to be caught on the grind. This is not a time for him to put in responsibility. He wants to have fun. But what he needs to learn is that his Saturn return is going to try to teach him that there is a fine line, a fine balance between having fun and saying, I'm just going to be hedonist and I'm going to be, I'm going to say whatever I want and kind of trash up the rug a little bit, and actually committing to something that's going to bring you enjoyment. So again, he's got to really toe the line this year. The Saturn return as well as that initiation into adulthood. So again, it's all about doing something that will really commit his family to long-term security and prosperity. And again, as I mentioned with George Russell, it can create champions. We already know that Max is a champion. But what's interesting is the Saturn return will go until 2028. When he won his first championship, he was in the 17/7 energy. 17 again, which is that star energy, what George is in right now. 7 is a chariot energy. That together is fast car winning world championship. It's very obvious, right? But if he hung on until next year, he's going into that 17 energy and he'll still be in his Saturn return. So I wonder if he continues to hang on if he wins the championship next year, because I already predicted last year he wasn't going to win this year, but he had a better shot 2027, right? So I'd be very intrigued if he does stay on. Maybe he stays on to 2028. I think he's got a contract too. He might win next year. Do I think he's going to win this year? No, but I think he might get very close. I accurately predicted his rise last year. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh yeah, I actually predicted this, but I kind of did. I did it on TikTok and people were like, what the fuck? So I said when he entered the 7 Energy in September, he was going to pick up like no other. I said, you're just going to see him winning races, clawing back points, and it's going to be crazy. People were like, how could you predict that? It's because he went from the 15 Energy, which is very much intense media scrutiny, which he got from crashing into George Russell or whatever. I'm not going to dispute that. Like, he got points taken off. It was a thing. There was a lot of media scrutiny because we saw a lot of interviews coming out where he was like, that's your opinion, I don't care. And people were like, what the fuck is this guy on, right? So there was a lot of backlash for him. People were saying he's a bully, he's doing all these things. Again, this is not what I'm saying. This is just what I was reading. So he's very much, again, that intense media scrutiny that Lewis Hamilton is in right now. He then quickly entered that 7 Energy, which again is a Chariot, the fastest card in the deck. So he really picked up. It's like bam, 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 really going. So it's like, okay, interesting. He's in that 7 Energy for the start of the season. So again, he might have a really good start to the season, very similar to Fernando Alonso. But then he moves into 6, which is the Lovers. It's actually ruled by Mercury. So it is, there's a lot of communication and there's a lot of energy about data and analytics. But all the same, I wonder if he's going to focus a lot more on his family. Maybe even having a much more of a public commitment to his girlfriend, Kelly. Again, the next year he would go into the 17. Jupiter being in the 9th in the summer is going to make him want different prospects. So this year, do I think he's going to win? No. I think he's in the top 5 for sure. But I think next year, he has a much better opportunity to win the championship. And I think it'd be quite easy and open for him. Again, in that Saturn return, he's being tested to understand what he finds fun in life. So if he finds that his regulations this year are not fun, he might be like, yeah, I'm only going to do it for a year or 2. And then he might find that he wins next year and he's like, oh, okay, then we reassess, right? So it's really interesting, his particular chart, but I think with that Sag rising, there's a lot of, there's a lot of reconsideration of what he wants from his career prospects. So the next few drivers I don't know much about, but I'm still going to do the energy reading for. So we have Isack Hadjar, who has now been promoted to Red Bull Racing from the Racing Bulls. He was born September 28th, 2004, so he's a very young boy. He is a Libra sun with an Aries moon. He gives that Aries moon so hard. He just don't suffer fools. His attitude is very sort of like, why are you talking to me? It's very French, but also it's kind of like, why are you talking to me? So at the moment, he's in a 6 Energy, which is the Lovers, again, ruled by Mercury, so very focused on data and analytics, a lot of testing energy, and sort of trying to adapt those regulations. What I would say, though, is he may face scrutiny and heavy criticism after Baku. He might either say something or a particular event happens where he pulls off a risky move and it causes a lot of controversy. It's specifically after Baku. I would be very interested if that actually came true, because I don't have his rising sign, so I can't be like, oh yeah, Uranus is doing this particular thing, we definitely know you're going to do something crazy. But in the energy he's in right now, it's more of a testing phase, more of an analytical phase, but I think he might find towards the end of the season some increased public scrutiny on his behalf. Again, when you move to that Red Bull seat, people have a lot of eyes on you because it's kind of a bit of a cursed seat, isn't it? So I'd be very interested if he actually adapts that well, or something happens after Baku in which it's like, I don't know if he's going to adapt this seat that well. Do I think that he's going to be in the top 10? I would say he's on the periphery, yes, for sure. I don't think he's going to be like last, but I think you would probably put him at something like 11 or 12. Next driver is Ollie Bearman. Ollie was born May 8th, 2005, and this boy is Taurus full through and through. He's Taurus Sun, Taurus Moon, and Taurus Venus, which is an exalted placement. And Taurus Moon is also exalted as well. So he's got some really lovely energy. It's very stubborn though. It's actually stubborn as a bull. I don't know much about Ollie, although I really like him. I'm starting to get more into sort of what his skill set is, but I don't get 5 from this guy at all, so this checks out. He seems very prim and proper, He seems sort of very, I think it could be a model, He just gives me sort of country club. And I think he probably likes people in his life that are prim and proper too, especially partners, who are very well refined, come from many. I think his partner does as well. Again, don't really know much. It's not a gossip channel. So at the moment, he's in the 5 Energy, which is the Hierophant. So that's really inspiring people's belief in it, like we had with Lando last year. I think a lot of people were interested in him transferring to Ferrari because he was in the junior Ferrari program, I believe. and seeing if he could do quite well, because there was one race, I can't remember now, this is like how far it's been. You can tell I'm an expert in this, can't you? I actually do know a lot of this stuff. It's just I can't remember exactly what race he was. But I think he got to like 4th or something like that. He did really well. And people were like, oh my God, he almost got a podium. And so then we're saying, oh my God, is he going to move to Ferrari? So he's going to have a lot of speculation, people believing him for the first start of the season. And then sort of around sort of late spring, he's going to enter the 9 energy. That's not an easy time in life. It's the hermit. It's very isolated. People don't understand you. You know, it's the weight of people's expectations on you. It's also very reserved, and it's also, you know, I don't want to diagnose it, but it's a bit depressive. So, you know, I think he could really struggle with his own feelings of success. And therefore I would put him a little bit lower than someone like Isack, for example. I'd put him more sort of like 14th, 15th, because I think although he might actually do quite well at the start of the season, I think for the first 2 months he might really struggle with his own sense of self-worth and self-esteem and the weight of people's expectations on him. So I wouldn't put him at the start. I could definitely be wrong, of course, but I don't feel it's going to be a crazy amount. Also, he has a strong concentration of Taurus energy, and Chiron, which is a wounded healer asteroid, moves into Taurus this year. And so, again, I don't know what house it's going to be in, but that's going to make aspects to, it's going to be conjunct his big 3. So I would, his big 3, his sun and his moon, and his Venus. So that's going to cause constriction and trauma, depending on the house. We don't really know what the themes are going to be, but I would say it's a bit of a struggle. So yeah, wouldn't put him at my top, unfortunately. The next driver is Esteban Ocon, Esti Besti. So he was born September 17th, 1996 in France, 3:20 p.m. Why did I say France? Like a Dutch person in France. He's a Virgo sun, Scorpio moon, and Leo rising. And he's also going through a Saturn return in Aries too. So we have a few drivers going through their Saturn return. Again, Saturn in Aries creates champions if you really put the hard work in. Leo rising itself is really lovely for him because Jupiter will be moving into his first house, which is going to bring an expansion of his identity. Although I'm starting to believe that Jupiter in the first house is not as lucky as we've been led to believe. And again, I'm thinking, Leo is ruled by the sun, so this is very sort of positive. But Leo rising is probably one of the most likely signs to not be a millionaire or billionaire. So it's actually a bit more of a struggle because it has its fingers in different pots. Scorpio moon, very debilitated placement in its fall. It's very emotionally dysregulated at times. It just kind of feels a bit odd. Virgo sun, again, very methodical. It's not a bad chart by any means. I mean, the Leo rising is bringing a lot of energy. It's really the destiny matrix that's making me wins. So he's got 21 energy right now. So he's in that conclusive, the world energy, very similar to Kimi Antonelli. It's Saturnian, and then he'll move into 16 in September. That ain't good. He's got Saturnian energy up the wazoo, right? So 16 is the tower. It's a point of crisis. That's when things go wrong. Personal life falls apart. Things just don't feel good. You're emotionally dysregulated. And the problem is when you have a 16 energy with something like a Scorpio moon. Oh, sending thoughts and prayers, my love. It's just not great. So I am not convinced he will do as good as someone like Isack, or maybe even Ollie Bearman. But then Ollie's got that freaking Chiron, you know, doing its thing in his chart. There is going to be some difficulty there. For Leo rising as well, he'll have an eclipse in August in his first house. And that's going to be a very competitive, aggressive eclipse. So we might see him really getting angry and having a lot more ferocity in the middle of the season. I wouldn't put him in my top at all. Again, he's definitely in the second half, middling around sort of 15, 16. Okay, so the next driver that was highly requested on TikTok is Carlos Sainz. He was born September the 1st, 1994. Do not have his rising sign, but again, he's a Virgo sun, Cancer moon. Can you see these very common placements coming through now? The analysis, the intuition to know what you want to do with your life, very strong. He's actually finished his Saturn return. He had a Saturn return in Pisces like myself, and he actually changed teams during that time and had to recommit to a new way of life from Ferrari to Williams. And again, during a Saturn return, you often have to change the course in your life or recommit, and you sometimes don't know where your place is. And of course, he kind of just got, well, I don't really know where to go. I'll go here, I guess. So he's had to recommit to that new way of life. So he's in the 20 energy, which is judgment. That's an energy that Charles Leclerc was in. It's very much sort of a stagnant energy, but it's also sort of repeating past mistakes and finding issues with them. Again, I don't think he had the season that we were expecting. I think towards the end he had, a better season because he had a few podiums, did he not? But also at the start of the season, I think there was quite a few commentaries where we were like, oh, this guy's not adapting in the way that we thought he would at all. And that 20 energy can be quite strong in that regard. The 6th energy, which he'll be moving into at the end of the season, is going to be much nicer because it will be more data-driven, more analytical. But again, you might also find that he's able to get on with teams more harmoniously. People like him. There's more fanfare around him and whatnot. Energy-wise, it's quite hard to pick up on how well he will do based on the fact that he's been in 20 energy and he will be in that for the start of the season and then going into 6. In my eyes, that feels very much like there's going to be some justice that is brought to him. So, for example, he gets a win, but also it's a very unexpected win, and then he may not be able to repeat that energy again. I would definitely put him in my top 10. I put him around sort of 9. I think he will do very well, but he's going to also struggle with some diplomacy or criticism within his team at the moment. The next Williams driver is Alex Albon. We really love Alex, he's great. March 23rd, 1996 is his birthday, no rising sign again. He just finished his Saturn return too, having to recommit to the way of life that he's in at the moment. He's an Aries sun, Taurus moon, nice exalted, I like that. And he will be in the 10 energy very soon. Just after Melbourne, he'll be in the 10 energy, which is what Charles Leclerc is in. Again, Wheel of Fortune, a fate, a conclusion. It's very much seesaw. It could go either way, but it's really very successful. What's interesting as well is that, again, Chiron will be hitting his moon sign this year, but we'll have a very big Aries stellium in April that is going to be concentrated and conjunct with his sun, which is going to give him a great boost in motivation. So I would be very interested to see if Alex gets a podium around springtime. I think he definitely could. Do I think he's going to win? No, I keep saying this. Do I think he's going to do well? I think he's very much neutral. I think he's just finished his Saturn return, so he's really learnt the lessons and he's moving on with gusto. But the problem is he's got a very similar energy to Carlos, and that there might be some strange diplomacy and criticism between teams at Williams. I don't know whether what the drivers are trying to say is not going over well with the engineers, but there's something here that feels like a mixed match within their team. And again, it's not just in Alex's chart, it's also in Carlos's as well. But I would put him at neutral in the top 10, maybe bordering on sort of, 10, 11. I think Carlos is going to do slightly better than him, but at the same time, I think he won't have a poor season. The next driver is Valterri Bottas, who is a really incredible driver. He was born August 28th, 1989. Don't have a rising sign for him, but he's, again, Virgo Sun, Leo Moon. Can you really see this pattern of Virgo energy coming through? He has fantastic energy. He goes from 7, which is the Chariot, right, which is what Max Verstappen's currently in, to 17, which is George Russell championship energy. Does that mean he's going to win? No. And the reason why is because we've got to use a bit of logic, right? The reason why I'm saying 17 and George Russell works well is because Mercedes regulations are adapted and we just know he's a consistent driver. It just makes more sense. Valtteri is going to be in Cadillac, which is a new team to F1. That means they have to really, test the ropes, understand what they're doing. However, I think he's going to have a really good season, all things, considered. I don't necessarily think he's going to be like, wow, Cadillac is in the top 3 of driver standings. No, but I think if you sat back and, analysed his season performance, in early 2027, you'd say, bloody hell, how'd he pull that off, right? So I think he's going to be in really good energy. And what also I like about the 17 is that it will project him into, the spotlight again, because he was a reserve driver for Mercedes. We didn't see him much. He was kind of behind the curtain. Now he's back in the spotlight, and people can sort of embrace him again. And I think he's going to be in a very sort of fascinating position. I also really love the Cadillac design. It just looks really cool. It's sleek. I kind of like it. So I think he might have a really interesting season, a bit more successful than we might be expecting him to have. So the next driver is also Cadillac, and that is Sergio Perez, or Checo, and he was born January 26, 1990, making him an Aquarius Sun and Aquarius Moon, exactly the same as Liam Lawson. He has a different energy though. So again, he's got all that Saturnian energy. We know that he's really struggled with that Red Bull seat, and there was not a lot of faith in him from Christian Horner, which is sad to see. There just definitely seems to be a bit of a dicey feeling about how he's going to do in this particular season. His energy is definitely not as good as Bottas is. He's in 16 energy, right? Which is like, oh no, that's the same as Esteban Ocon. It's not good. And I think he's also going to have a lot of that 9 hermit isolation energy too. I don't know if he's going to adapt well to this. You know, I think he's probably got a lot of hang-ups from this last experience and stint in Red Bull, and that can really stay on your mind. But also, I don't think he's going to adapt to it as well as someone like Bottas, who has more of that experience being in Mercedes. So I think this could be a personal point of crisis to him, whether he wants to continue doing this or move away. There seems to be shades of, you know, again, not depression, but just feeling like the weight of people's expectations, very similar to Ollie Bearman. So I would actually put him very low on the standings. Actually, probably, I hate to say it, I'd put him dead last, just because I don't think that it's going to be the best energy. I'd love to be proven wrong, of course, but no. The last 2 drivers are now in Audi. So they were in Kick Sauber, they moved to Audi. It's so funny because throughout my whole life, I've been the biggest Audi fan. And so people are always telling me like, why are you not supporting Audi? Because I like moved to Mercedes now, but I'm like, I'm German, so it's got to be like a German car that I support. So the first driver is Niko Hulkenberg, who got his first podium last year in Silverstone, which was amazing. So he was born August 1987, making him a Leo sun and a Cancer moon. A lot of Cancer moons here, right? Very emotional. He's in 18 energy, which is actually Cancer. It is the moon. So he's really aligning himself to his intuition and what he wants to do this year. What I really like about Niko's chart is that there is a sense that he is always going to remain positive no matter what, you know, and he's going to adapt to things really well. Again, with Audi being a slightly newer sort of team now, as we know it to be, I don't think he's going to be in the top 10 by any means, but I think he's a fantastic driver that adapts well. And I think actually with his Leo sun, he's going to have quite a lot of prosperity when Jupiter is expanding his ambitions and goals. So I think he will never give up the fight, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be successful. So he's definitely in the second half, and I would put him at around something like 16. And the last driver is also an Audi driver, and that is Gabriel Bortoleto. And he was born October 14th, 2004, making him a Libra sun and Libra moon. So he's very Venusian, which is really beautiful and harmonious. He's in the 10 energy, which is very similar to Charles Leclerc's Wheel of Fortune. It's actually quite prosperous. And so I think he will have an interesting start to the season, adapting quite well. But again, it's going to be adapt or die for him. So if he does not adapt well to the regulations this year, it's not going to be an easy run for him. He would then move into 18 energy, which is what Niko Hulkenberg, his teammate, is currently in. So they may share some similar, some similar energies, which of course you do in the same team. And actually, you might have noticed throughout this video, there's a lot of energies that are shared based on like cars that use similar engines and different type of teams and whatnot. So the 18 energy again is very intuitive and focused a lot on what you are saying about yourself. And so the noise you have to kind of cut out. You have to be like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. I'm going to continue to adapt to this particular energy. But what does the moon actually do? It adapts, right? It's able to, you know, manipulate the tides and move in and out. So again, there's a focus like after October, so towards the end of the season, we've got a focus of in and out. So maybe one good race, one bad race, which actually he had quite last year. Sometimes he'd have a really good race and the next it was like absolutely tragic. So it seems to be very in and out again. Wheel of Fortune with the moon is very like, you just don't know what you're going to get. It's very much roll of the dice. But at the same time, I think it's also a nice sort of new beginning for him here. And it almost feels like a fresh, clean slate. Again, not going to win. He's going to be in the second half, but I think there's a lot of like inspiration, and I think people are really rooting for him, you know, with like a lot of gusto. So if I had to give my top 5 for this year, first is going to be George Russell. Second is going to be a fight between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Third is going to be Oscar Piastri. Fourth is going to be Max Verstappen. And I think, again, so that technically makes 5, but if you know what I mean. And then I think Alonso, Bottas and Lando will be very good. I think Alonso and Bottas having a good start and doing a lot better than expected. Lando will do fine, but I don't think he's going to win. And like I said, as I predicted, I think his head might be elsewhere. Okay, so these are just my energy predictions based on what information we've got. It's really important to remember that I don't have a rising sign. If I had the astrological chart, I could predict with a lot more accuracy. Second, I would also say that the energy has to be promoted in a certain way, so it can be positive or negative. So it's very easy to say Servant Chariot is great, but if you use it in the wrong way, it can be actually very lethargic, very slow. It can bring delays. And also third, these are just my predictions. If I get them wrong or I'm completely off base, that's on me. It's not on Astrology or Destiny Matrix. So please don't think that if I get things wrong, this doesn't work. It's just me that doesn't work, right? I'll take the responsibility that my predictions are wrong. And also, we're not really... we're not saving the world here. So if my predictions are wrong, who really gives a shit? You know, it's just a bit of fun and it's just interesting to see the energies. The reason why I'm doing this video is because it was like highly requested on my TikTok, because some people are interested in F1 and spirituality. And also at the same time, I think it's really important to keep an open mind. You know, a lot of people may watch this video and think this is bullshit. Like, if you like F1, you're probably not going to be into astrology or spirituality, but actually you'll be really surprised at the amount of billionaires, millionaires and athletes do use an astrologer. I've actually worked with a few top athletes recently for astrology, and you would be surprised at what they want to know and how interested they are in it. I've always said as well, if I could get hold of one of the drivers' rising signs and do a prediction or reading for them, it'd be really fun to do that. But keep an open mind, right? I know people will probably take the piss. I mean, people have been like, wow, we've got Destiny Matrix F1 prediction for GTA 6. But it's a little bit of fun, and again, if the predictions are wrong, not the end of the world, it's on me. This is the first time I'm doing it, really, actually. I used to keep a spreadsheet, and I'd never tell anybody, because I was kind of scared that people would think that, like, it's bullshit, and I don't want to, like, make people not believe in astrology and Destiny Matrix, but again, it's difficult when you don't have the rising sign or the houses or how it's going to affect a person. And again, Destiny Matrix has to be analysed alongside with what you know is going on in somebody's life. And we don't know these drivers personally. And there's always a lot of things going on behind the scenes. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. It's very different to what I normally do, but I really wanted to put my predictions out there before the Australian Grand Prix on the 8th. And yeah, I'll see you for my next video.